Hello and welcome everybody. We are here today at Frontline Club Bucharest with Mr. Julian Assange, the founder and editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, via an online feed from the embassy in London, where he has been forced into staying almost 3 years now. As you all may know, Mr. Assange coordinated WikiLeaks from 2006, and since then the organization released massive batches of secret information regarding activities of US and other countries' governments, including some of our own Romanian state. I'm Claudiu Pândaru, editor of Mediafax Group, and with my colleague Andrei Luca Popescu, journalist at Gandul, we will conduct this discussion. I hope that Mr. Assange is online with us, and I will say hello to him. And let me start by asking, what is your perspective now when you look at WikiLeaks and your work in the last 5 years? Many people want to ask you a very simple question. Was it worth it?
Your question is, was it worth it for me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I guess time will tell. I don't believe journalists or anyone else should be martyrs to something they believe in. They should fight hard and risk a lot for something that they care about, and to kind of keep to not be susceptible to paranoia that is generated by various groups that like to use coercive force, principally states, but not only states, and to test whether that is true or not. Most of these groups achieve their power through the projection of fear into others, so people self-censor, journalists self-censor, or otherwise check their activities and police their activities in light of what they think that those in positions of state power or non-state groups that can exert coercive force might frown on. So ultimately, it will depend on how the situation proceeds. But to date, I think we're going pretty well. I predicted just 5 years ago, when we started this very engaged process with the United States. We had a variety of skirmishes, but we were, if you think of the United States as a sort of three-legged beast, one leg is the military power of the United States, another leg is its intelligence power, and another leg is those people connected to its elite establishment networks, which are intimately involved in the State Department. So we've managed to kick all three legs of this beast, and of course it's gotten up and is seriously engaging with us. And my prediction was that that engagement would be a 5 to 7 year process. We're now almost in year 5. WikiLeaks as an organization has managed to survive and expand, and the political and legal situation is clarifying such that if it keeps its continued trajectory, then I think we will have largely beaten that within a year, possibly 2. A lot depends on Hillary's election, how this new government here in the United Kingdom proceeds. It's promised to pull out of the European Court of Human Rights within 100 days. That may have some effects. But overall, when you're in a very political situation, it is the politics that influences how matters are technically decided. And as far as the politics is concerned, things are going very well for us.
Do you think that the election in America will change the status of WikiLeaks in the United States?
To a degree. But we have to understand what's happened with Barack Obama, that the United States is a very big country. It has very large bureaucracies. It has a very large intelligence community of some 100,000 people. It has a deep state that is able to exert itself. It has more than 5.5 million people who have security clearances, more than 1.5 million top secret security clearances. That is the population of Norway. That state within a state exists and exerts itself regardless of who becomes president. And in fact, it does not tolerate anyone becoming president who shows signs of substantially reducing its budgets or powers. So I don't expect an enormous change. However, Hillary is very hawkish in relation to intelligence and international affairs. We have had a personal battle, which she remembers keenly. In fact, she said that she would be apologizing for the rest of her life for WikiLeaks. And we're going to see some of that if she is elected president. So it may make some difference. I think a bigger concern is that the next president of the United States is likely to be a Democrat. And that means that there is no restraining force from the opposition. So my theory on two-party system states is that it is basically the opposition that restrains government, and what the opposition's position is determines what things it's going to restrain government on. And whoever gets into government essentially merges with the bureaucracy after 6 months, because the mass of the bureaucracy is so large, and the companies connected to it is so large, that politicians cannot hope to shift its direction any more than someone can hope to stand in front of a speeding freight train and stop it. So if there's a Republican president, the Democratic opposition will be able to complain about abuses in civil liberties and warmongering. But with a Democratic president, as we've seen for the last 7 years, the Republicans in opposition are not going to complain about civil liberties and about warmongering because they're connected to the police and intelligence industries and profit from that. That is part of their base. So it is perversely much better for WikiLeaks, and I think for many other countries as well, when there is a Republican administration in the United States, because the Democrats act as a restraining force. But when the Democrats are in power, the Republicans who are in opposition then simply push the Democratic administration into more spying and more warmongering.
Mr. Assange, I wanted to ask you, what do you feel you accomplished or changed in the world or society by publishing the US Department of State cables? This was the biggest WikiLeaks release and the most famous, if I can say so. There are some people who say that this publishing hurt some innocent people, or may have hurt some innocent people in some radical countries.
Well, they're wrong. They're liars. It's as simple as that. US government under oath in 2013, the General Carr, who was charged into trying to find any little scrap of evidence to show that our publications had physically harmed a single person, was unable to do so. And that was in the criminal trial of an alleged source, then Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning. So there is nothing. Similarly, NATO in Kabul was forced to admit that they could not find anyone who needed to be physically protected as a result of our publications. This is a tactic that governments have applied for over 100 years. When they are exposed, when we exposed, in this case, the US government being directly involved in the deaths of more than 100,000 people, according to their own records, on a case-by-case basis, on a kill-by-kill basis, they attempted to change the conversation from one of their complicity in the deaths of more than 100,000 people into some kind of speculative notion that information being released could lead to harm. It's a kind of kindergarten rhetoric. It's absurd that the media pushes it. It's a very self-destructive process by the media, but unfortunately many media organizations are powered up to the state, and are also like to speak against their rivals' successes. In this case, WikiLeaks was very successful as a media organization, and so a number of media organizations wanted to attack our success and displace our story by pushing a Pentagon line. But as it has turned out, even the United States government has been forced to admit it was all rubbish.
Okay.
So the successes, okay. Something very hard to measure. History is an unfolding process. The success to me is, there's an abstract success, which is we took very serious, suppressed parts of the global historical record. How the largest empire that the world has ever seen behaved in practice, how its institutions behave in practice, how their decision-making and logistics occur in practice. And because the United States is the largest empire the world has ever seen, with more than 1,000 military bases in various countries spying on the majority of electronic communications across the world, its records are also about every single country in the world, including Romania, and what has, several cases that have happened in Romania. So it also provided information about what was happening domestically in every single country in the world, and we continue to do that to various degrees. So the success is permitting people to understand their own histories and their own human institutions. Now, in terms of what comes from that, my belief is, and it's obvious if you think about it, that a political theory can only be as good as its understanding of its environments. A scientific theory can only be as good as its measurements. A newspaper can only be as good as its sources. And in computer programming, we call this garbage in, garbage out. It doesn't matter how good a program you have. If you're sticking garbage into it, you're going to get garbage out of it. If we stick garbage into our newspapers, we'll get garbage out. If we stick garbage into our political theorists, we will get garbage out. And to date, unfortunately, human civilization has largely been feasting on political and geopolitical garbage because there has not been the proper records of how modern, powerful human institutions actually behave. So that's what that's what we have put into the public record and kept into the public record, despite all the attempts to remove it. Now,
okay, that's perfect, Mr.
Concrete outcomes are quite hard.
That's perfect, but you are talking about political garbage, state garbage. Do you think that there should be a limit in what kind of secret documents some organizations like WikiLeaks releases? I mean, mostly you release, as you said, documents involving the state, the government, the army, politics. But recently, WikiLeaks released the Sony emails, which crossed the line into private business. How do you judge the public's interest in this kind of case?
Well, we have an explicit editorial criteria. Unlike most media organizations, we are explicit. We publish documents of diplomatic, political, historical, or ethical significance that have been suppressed in some manner or where there's a fear of suppression. That's it. Now, in the case of these Sony materials, they were under active attempts to suppress them. But your question your question revolves around the notion that there is a separation between government and big business. That's a fanciful notion. Our publications of Sony show just how fanciful that really is. Here we have Sony Pictures, United States, responsible for, many of the big movie franchises that you've seen, from Spider-Man to Clooney's work. Deeply involved in pushing for the war on Gaza, trying to massage a positive view for Israel. The principles of Sony involved in this very directly. The principles of Sony very directly involved in even the Scottish referendum. So there was our emails revealed that Lyndon, the CEO of Sony, had set up several meetings with David Cameron. And his briefs for those meetings, prior to the Scottish independence referendum last year, was to use the potential influence of a series called Outlander, which was set in Scotland, which was pro-British and anti-English, to use its air date as a means to, it's clear, get leverage in relation to tax concessions in the UK. Now, as it turned out, the air date of Outlander was held back until after the Scottish referendum in the United Kingdom, but not in other countries. In other countries, it aired before the Scottish referendum. So big business becomes big by keeping government on side in order to adjust regulations, to get special dispensations and so on. So that's the reality. There's not really a real separation between big business and big government.
I'm just wondering if there will be a point in time that you will... I'm just wondering, it will be a point in time that when you will publish your emails with, I don't know, the leaders, from the chief editors from The Guardian, from New York Times, for historical reason, of course.
Well, we have published some already. If a source comes to us with that information and we think it meets that criteria, which it probably does, then we will publish it, for sure. We even published one of our donor lists, much to our donors' horror, which was submitted to us by a source. We judged that, yes, it was of...
but have you ever...
It was a political and diplomatic...
have you ever refused to publish a document, some documents, because of their secret nature, of, I don't know, possible harmful consequences? I believe, from a long experience, we have now published nearly 9 million documents across thousands of cases, that there's always a way to publish. Now, that's not to say that always one should publish everything at once exactly as you get it. Occasionally it may be necessary to restrict for a limited period of time some information about individuals who, it's very rare, very, very rare, who may genuinely be the target of unlawful reprisals, but it's extremely rare, and the way we deal with it, these very rare cases, is to hold back that information for a limited period of time and to say why we are doing it explicitly. But it's nearly all a beat up. This information can cause harm. People kill people, information does not kill people, and we've seen from a long history of our work and other people's work that it's very, very rare that information published by the media is a significant factor in any way whatsoever to that kind of thing going on. What does occur every single day is governments killing people, every single day. Many of the WikiLeaks big releases ended up in a controversy with its media partners. How do you explain that? Have they entered a bidding war with media outlets over these WikiLeaks documents, or have they tried to monetize the documents?
It's almost complete garbage. It's almost complete garbage, except for two cases. We have contracts with more than 100 newspapers, more than 110 newspapers around the world. Excellent working relationships in every continent, nearly every language group. The Guardian newspaper here in the United Kingdom broke a contract that we had with them. As a result of them breaking a contract, we refused to deal with the Guardian newspaper for a period of time. We deal with them now, but for a period of time we banned dealing with the Guardian because if an organisation cannot abide its written contracts, then you cannot possibly deal with them. Now, a similar issue was that the New York Times was censoring information that it agreed not to censor in our partnership with them, Guardian as well. We said that they could censor information solely to do with reprisals if such information occurred in diplomatic cables. They censored information for political reasons, very clear political reasons, for pseudo-national security reasons, for reasons that had to do with whipping up war against Iran in the case of a crucial document in relation to missile shipments between North Korea and Iran. They redacted a 62-page cable down to just 2 paragraphs, the 2 paragraphs that served their case in whipping up a war with Iran, when the rest of the cable spoke against that. So these media organizations acted in violation of contract and acted in a corrupt way. They corrupted journalism which had our name on it and therefore were interfering with our reputation. So they suffered the consequences for a period of time. The editor of the New York Times, who was involved in that, has subsequently resigned. And the deputy editor, who was the chief cause of problems in The Guardian, has also subsequently resigned.
I wanted to ask do you think there should be a filter between a whistleblower or an organization like WikiLeaks and the public? Do you think that just publishing large databases of information has an impact on the public as it is, or should there be an interpreter or a filter that filters that information, which is kind of the job of journalists?
What makes you think we don't do this? This is like your previous example. So, previous example, where did this rubbish tale go around that we don't have excellent working relationships with the more than 110 media organizations that we have contracts with? It went about because we banned the Guardian newspaper. So it's like, the Guardian just did this thing, it's not him, it's not me, it's him. It's not, it's because they don't get along with anyone. It's not that the Guardian doesn't get along with people. That's what happened. The Guardian doesn't get along with us. The Guardian broke its contracts. As a result, to defend its own reputation, it then tried to reframe its abuse of contract law to make it seem like, in fact, it was all just because WikiLeaks is very finicky and, very pushy in relation to our contracts. Similarly, this view that WikiLeaks doesn't analyze its materials is complete garbage. We have journalists who write classical stories. I have written thousands of analyses and stories on our material. It's simply that we have so much material, such, if you like, an embarrassment of riches, and that it's so effective and so newsworthy that we have published so much material, that this starts to, if you like, displace in the public imagination what we're doing. The novelty, if you like, it's not novel that we write analyses and we write stories. It is novel that we're publishing so much material that you can search very easily and is all nicely indexed and mapped. So that is focused on. And then in relation to other media organizations who are, who are jealous of our successes, not newspapers other than in English. The non-English speaking newspapers have been great, but we're seen to be more competitors in English. So The Guardian especially for a period, but some others here in London, a little bit the New York Times, are very jealous of our success. We are a social and economic competitor, a competitor even for prizes. So they try to reframe the situation to, oh, well, WikiLeaks is just famous because it is engaged in this particular work and not the work that we do. You know, they're trying to make it look like we're not, to kind of, if you like, hide their weaknesses in terms of producing groundbreaking journalism, and also in terms of why WikiLeaks manages to have so much success and attention. They're saying, oh, well, it's a different thing to us. You know? Otherwise, they have to explain why they have been censoring so much material. And it's because, frankly, because they're a bunch of cowards, and at the higher level, not necessarily individual journalists, but at the institution level, a bunch of cowards, and their principals, people who control the structure of the organization, have not deployed a structure which is resistant to censorship. We specialize in doing this. We have, you know, this doesn't come from nowhere. It's as a result of we deploy technical and legal infrastructure across the world in terms of our business registrations, in terms of where servers are, in terms of the legal mechanisms that we use to structure our organization to make it resistant from attack. Any organization can do that if it has the will. They don't have the will because their will is bound up with simply being a bit more competitive with the other competing newspapers in their town. Their will is not actually to make sure that they can publish under all circumstances. We have that will. That is how this organization was geared to be. Its place, its economic niche in the world is that, being the publisher of last resort, being the one place in the world that you can trust to publish fearlessly and frankly, not because we are necessarily, but because we were set up to do that. And every technical and legal structure is geared around that because that's what we really wanted to do.
Okay, let's go to Romania. In Romania, we've had a very big debate over the so-called Big Brother laws, a package of laws which establish how and what kind of private and online communication data may be sent, made the state authorities retain and access at the telecom companies directly. The laws were rejected, but a new law is now in discussion which mainly provides access to this personal data with permission from a judge. This is very important to mention, that can be obtained by the said authorities in a 48-hour time frame. It's an international debate, but we are having, as I'm trying to explain, this kind of debate in Romania too. Where do you think that the privacy ends and national or international security comes into the picture?
It's very important and healthy sign that Romania is having the debate, because in many situations there is no debate. Mass electronic surveillance simply occurs behind the scenes with no debate whatsoever. Now, it's an interesting question of where this debate is really coming from. In other countries, for example, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, United States, it's come about as a result of the exposure of these practices, which are occurring anyway, and the intelligence and policing agencies and their friends, if you can use such a word, push to make what they are already doing legal, to remove a risk that down the track they may be prosecuted for what they are already doing behind the scenes. Now, I'm not an expert on Romania, but I rather suspect that a similar constraints and fears lie behind the scenes within Romania in generating this debate. it's very hard to keep control of the appetites of intelligence agencies. Their appetites are always to, as the National Security Agency says, and in its documentation, to collect it all, to keep it all, to index it all, and to exploit it all. The way electronic communications are proceeding, the costs of surveilling each person are diminishing by about 50% per year. And now it has reached the cost where a country like Romania can surveil the majority of important electronic communications, SMSs, emails, some other forms of internet communications, most of the time, for most of the people. It's a very hard situation to deal with. My view is these agencies specialize in breaking law, specialize in doing things in secret. Mass electronic surveillance is a very complex process. It's very hard to police and regulate and make sure the law is followed. They're not going to obey the law, even if the law is passed. However, you can't abandon the legislative playing field. You can't say it's all hopeless and therefore we're not going to, at least in law, say that this should be done. Because then immediately they move forward at an even faster rate and occupy the legislative playing field and say, well, we have practice on our side, we have technology on our side, and we have the law on our side. It's necessary to check this development in the technical domain, in the political domain, and in the legislative domain. But ultimately, none of these domains is going to be enough to check this aggressive development. Journalists need to face that reality. And there are certain technical methods that you can use to make the surveillance harder. And a lot of those are developing in response to Edward Snowden revelations. So a lot of cryptography being developed for various things. And that is going to retard them a little bit. But ultimately quite a hard process, and it is going to change the structure of individual societies and will change the structure of international society. Arguably has already changed the structure of international society. It is a development that is perhaps only comparable to the invention of the atomic bomb and the ICBM missile, because it changes the geopolitical relationships between states and within states.
Okay, another question about Romania. Romania is on a list of European countries that allegedly hosted the CIA black sites, secret CIA prisons. These European countries like Romania, Poland, Lithuania are among the best partners that the USA have in Central and Eastern Europe. A former president of Romania said that he allowed the CIA to have a secret prison here in Romania as a gesture of goodwilling ahead of Romania's access to NATO. Do you think this kind of secret cooperation should have limits or be more transparent to the public in any way, if possible?
Well, there's no greater abuse that a state can commit than to secretly assassinate people or to secretly imprison them without process. And now the United States engaged in both with its secret assassination lists that have no judicial oversight, no public oversight. Even the rules, how one gets onto those lists, are kept secret. Similarly, the United States, in doing that in Romania, corrupts Romania in the most serious of ways. I think that as far as that one has a state at all, preventing extrajudicial imprisonment and extrajudicial assassination has to be the very first thing that a state does, its highest priority. And there has been a significant degree of impunity in these cases, although I'm pleased to see that Poland, Italy, Germany have been taken cases. Macedonia was also taken to the ECHR in relation to the El Masri case. That judgment, incidentally, used 5 documents from WikiLeaks about the CIA imprisonment and rendition of the German citizen El Masri. There has been complete impunity in Sweden for its cooperation with the CIA in rendition. It's very important that it's vital that Romania show that this most serious violation of the premise of what a state is to be is not tolerated, and there not be impunity in the case. That there be prosecutions, which Romania is obligated to do under the CAT, the Convention Against Torture. It has an international obligation under that treaty to investigate and prosecute itself the allegations of torture.
What do you think about Edward Snowden? What's the difference?
And I'll just say, at a sort of geostrategic level, it's absolutely no. I think it's a very reasonable question. Romania has had previous problems with Russia and some of its other neighbors. Does it need to give the United States this carrot in order to protect itself? Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. The United States is trying, through a variety of means, to gain more control along the previous Soviet states. NATO is also very interested in that. The weapons manufacturers who sell to NATO are interested in that. There are various resources that Romania has. US companies, German companies are interested in those resources. So Romania gets what it wants in relation to Russia without having to give away.
Don't you think that Russia is a threat to Romania? Don't you think that Russia is a threat to Romania?
Of course, in the long term, Russia is a threat to Romania simply because it is a large country. It is its own civilization, and it's geographically close. That's reality. Romania is a smaller country. Russia is a larger country. Romania needs to understand and position itself carefully in relation to its large neighbors like Russia and a bit further afield, Germany.
Okay, let's talk about Edward Snowden.
So I would say,
Please.
We shouldn't look at geostrategic relationships through an old world lens. Yes, Russia is close. Yes, Germany is close. However, the way the world is developing is that the concept of the state is breaking down. It's not a simple concept anymore. And national borders are becoming very porous in relation to control over investments, movements of people, and especially movements of telecommunications. So the United States is busily annexing, taking control over, in Romanian and other territories, the computer systems of those territories. That is, a type of annexing that is occurring. So it's not only important what countries are geographically close, because electrons move at the speed of light. The United States is less than 200 milliseconds away from Romania in terms of its ability to influence Romania at the electronic level.
Okay, there is a larger discussion about Romania and Russia. I don't want to enter this line right now. For the third time, you're not avoiding, no? Let's talk about Mr. Snowden. What do you think about his whistleblowing? Have he ever tried to contact you before going on his own, for example?
The Guardian, I have to be careful for Mr. Snowden's sake and our sake in relation to the legal situation. As you are probably aware, that WikiLeaks went head-to-head with the National Security Agency, the Department of State, and the Department of Justice in getting Mr. Snowden out of Hong Kong and getting him asylum, ultimately in Russia. Now, we are being investigated in relation to that by the FBI in the United States, me personally, and Sarah Harrison, our journalist who took that path out of Hong Kong to Russia with him, protected him for 40 days in the airport, was involved in filing his asylum applications, and stayed with him 24 hours a day for 4 months at my instruction in Russia to make sure that also the Russian intelligence services were not able to pressure him, and also that there couldn't be false claims that they were pressuring him when they were not, because we were witness to all these proceedings. In relation to his revelations, well, they're a treasure, extremely important for understanding, and to a degree, a political economy in winding back mass surveillance. It's not going to be wound back because it's proceeding at such a rate, but at least retarding it in an important manner. Those documents, for example, contain and have been published by Glenn Greenwald, information that I was put on an NSA manhunting list in 2009, and that WikiLeaks was, at the legal level in the National Security Agency, WikiLeaks was viewed as a foreign malicious actor, presumably in order to get more legal authorities by the National Security Agency to target us in a more intensive way, including the US citizens that work for us, and that GCHQ, the British equivalent of the National Security Agency, had been spying on us in at least 2012. So this information is not just very interesting to me at a journalistic level. I've been writing about the National Security Agency for 20 years, but it is personally important to me and to our organization, because it reveals spying by the National Security Agency on me and spying by GCHQ on WikiLeaks as an organization, and a legal framework developed in the National Security Agency to describe WikiLeaks as a foreign malicious actor.
Why do you think Snowden chose Russia for his asylum? And don't you think that this kind of damages the impact of his publications, I mean, running in the hands of the so-called West enemy or arch enemy?
Only in permitting additional propaganda, but it is all garbage. It is complete garbage. Mr. Snowden is not a prisoner of Russia. He is a particular type of prisoner of the United States. The United States cancelled his passport as he was transitioning through Russia. He had an onwards flight booked to Cuba and Latin America, and it was the United States that cancelled his passport, the United States that prevented him leaving Russia. Now, a much more interesting question is, why is it that it was only Russia and Venezuela and Ecuador and Bolivia that were willing to stand up to give everyone asylum? Well, the answer is obvious. Other states are simply too scared of the United States. And that speaks to their position in the world. Airspace in Europe was closed down to President Evo Morales of Bolivia under the basis that his jet flight back from Moscow might have been carrying Edward Snowden. Was there any legal process in Western Europe that occurred? There was no legal process. What happened was that it was closed down as a result, and purely as a result, of telephone calls from US intelligence to the states of France, Spain, and Portugal, who closed their airspace to a presidential jet, forcing it to land in Vienna. as a result. And that really shows you the true nature of the relationship between Western Europe and the United States. And when push comes to shove, all these post-war notions about human rights, the right to asylum, the right for people to speak freely, it is all nothing in comparison with the relationship that these states had with the United States.
But did you ever thought of asking asylum in Russia instead of Ecuador?
We surveyed a number of states, Russia, Argentina, India, about what the asylum regimes were, the bureaucracy, the political process, etc. My view was that my particular situation here, it would be difficult in terms of that Russia runs a much more bureaucratic state and had been trying to mend relations with the United Kingdom, so that Russia would be difficult. Now the situation may have changed, and that Russia has realized that there's no bridges left to burn.
Okay, so what are your future plans with WikiLeaks, for example?
The future plans? Well, if you look at what has happened over the last 2 years, we have successfully fought off a really very serious banking blockade. An embargo, like the type that was erected against Cuba, was erected against WikiLeaks, except there was no legislative or administrative support whatsoever. It was an extrajudicial blockade, no judiciary involved, but it was also an extra administrative blockade. No administrative mechanism even was used to erect this blockade. These are purely old boys networks in the United States, and as a result, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Bank of America, Western Union, Discover, Diners Club, JCB, and Swiss Post Finance blockaded us from receiving payments. Even when we went to pay our lawyers in Latin America, some of these payments would transit through the Bank of America in the United States, where they were seized. Even Yoko Ono, when she went to donate a prize that she had awarded to us, was blockaded by the Bank of America. So that's the type of financial censorship that this informal shadow state, if you like, of the United States was applying to us. Now, we have successfully litigated that in a number of different countries, and so we have won against Visa, we have won against MasterCard, we have won against PayPal, and those parts of that blockade have disappeared. Bank of America is still going on. The result is that WikiLeaks is back in the black, and we are able to continue on as an organization. We also had to erect, like Cuba does or like Iran does, a whole lot of alternate financial infrastructure. This has left us in a really very strong position. So we've had this major battle in relation to economic censorship, where they tried to cut the economic throat of all our journalists, tried to make an economic unilateral death penalty to a European organization, United States, without any basis in European law and without any basis in US law. Okay, so then we have been able to build up a whole lot of infrastructure projects that we couldn't do previously because we were so busy trying to defend ourselves and our publications. And these major infrastructure projects have started to come to fruition. So if you go to wikileaks.org, you'll see that we have an extremely interesting search interface now, significantly more sophisticated in terms of how you can use it than Google. You can ask that a word be in the same sentence as another word, or same paragraph, or in a particular distance, or in the subject matter of an email, and so on. And that searches now simultaneously more than 8.3 million documents that we've published, and we have been incorporating other very significant databases. So just for example today, essentially the whole US intelligence community, these people stick their records, for example, on LinkedIn. which is, a sort of professional social networking site. And they think that they're secret. And they put all sorts of stuff in there, like that they're working on JPEL, Joint Progress Effects List, which is assassination list that we first published about in 2010. And it's used by ISAF countries and NATO. Romania is in both, for assassinating people in Afghanistan. It is the assassination list. So that they're involved in the nomination of of people onto this list, the management of this list, the target selection, etc. Anyway, we have fed all that into our system, and which has been released today. What else are we doing? Yeah, we're on road to publish more than 1 million documents this year. Just on Sunday, we revealed a big dossier from the Trident nuclear whistleblower here in Great Britain. So Great Britain has a nuclear weapons program, 4 submarines involved, called Trident. It's based at Faslane in Scotland. And this system has been decaying because it's been there for like 30 years, and it's been decaying at a security level in terms of how things are conducted and the sorts of people who have access. A submariner on that sub, one of the nuclear warships, sorry, one of the nuclear submarines, gave us a report which we have published. And then there's been a manhunt and all sorts of dramatic things occurring this week. Last night, he flew into Edinburgh and has been arrested by, which he wanted to do, arrested by UK military police and is now kept in captive. We'll see what happens with his military trial in Edinburgh. So lots of quite interesting stuff in terms of various other court cases. We've taken criminal cases against the FBI in Denmark, against Swedish intelligence, they're called Sapo in Sweden, against US intelligence in Germany, against US informer, the FBI's star witness against us in Iceland. We have now put that star witness in prison in Iceland. He's in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and for sex crimes, which we've managed to discover, and is also facing trial for another 11 offences of sex crimes. So that's the FBI's star witness. So we're quite pleased. About 2 years ago, we went from being in a position of really just defending our publications, defending our human infrastructure, seeing whether we could survive this onslaught. We have survived. We have not destroyed a single publication that was asked to be destroyed. We have published all those things that we were going to publish. We continue to dealing with US military or US government whistleblowers. We're on course to publish 1 million documents this year. We've defeated this massive financial blockade. We've hired more staff. So I think there's I'm not going to say things are easy, but I think this 5 to 7 year trajectory, my view about that was right. And yeah, I think we're doing well.
What about your personal plans? I presume I know that you want to leave the embassy.
So personally,
yeah.
Well, this initial view that it would be 5 to 7 years, but during that time, even if WikiLeaks as an organization was wiped out, and it hasn't been, we've been successful in resisting those attempts, we would have a platform. I would have a platform. And we'd have this platform as a result of the legal attack on us. Now, let's look at that. So there's a whole variety of legal attacks. More than 120 people the US admitted were in the WikiLeaks war room 24/7, principally Defense Intelligence Agency and FBI. But now, the way it is developed in the United States, it's principally the Department of Justice that is pursuing the case, the National Security Division, and the Criminal Division, with the FBI being the principal agent in pursuing. The CIA and FBI are giving support for that. The CIA publicly admitted its WikiLeaks task force. So it's a big case. It continues. They show no sign of dropping it. They can't really drop it because of prestige reasons, because there's too many aggrieved parties in the State Department, FBI, sorry, in the State Department, Pentagon, and National Security Agency. Okay. Now, at the UK end, we also have this Swedish case that has intervened. For my formal detention here in the United Kingdom, formally, the excuse that is used is that the Swedes issued an extradition request for an uncharged matter, a preliminary investigation that I'd already dropped, which was resurrected in the heat of this. There's been quite a lot of legal action about that recently. That's going quite well. We even have sort of disagreements in the Swedish judiciary. And now the question there is to do with the UN is making a judgment on the issue, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and the ECHR looks like will be taking the matter of my ongoing detention in this embassy. Now, the UK says that they refuse to confirm or deny where there's already a US extradition request. We now have a new government in the UK which says that it's going to scrap appeals to the ECHR within 100 days. They're not going to find that so easy. It may affect how the case is in practice conducted here, but the politics is working out really well. The rest of Europe can see if the UK is making statements that it's going to scrap recognition of the ECHR, which no country in the Council of Europe, the other 47 countries in the Council of Europe do not do. It's really showing its hands in this matter. There's been within the UK, I wouldn't say a revolution, but the recent elections saw the Scottish National Party, which is pushing for independence, completely dominate, take 57 out of 60 seats Scotland-wide. Now those 50 MPs have gone into the parliament here. And so there's a kind of tension in relation to the Tory government. The gloves are off with the Tory government. It's no longer in coalition. The Conservatives here are naked on their own and are coming up with, frankly, crazy policies like withdrawing from the ECHR, a statement even by David Cameron and the Home Secretary that it's not enough for people in the UK to follow the law anymore. That even if you are following the law, they're still going to have the police intervene in relation to public statements. They're going to have pre-publication review. They're going to declare that particular people are extremists, even though they're following the law, even though there's been no allegation they've broken the law, that say things that encourage extremism. And these people will have to have pre-publication review. The particular meeting sites can be banned. The particular groups can be banned, even though they're not doing anything that is illegal. Not even the government is alleging they're doing anything illegal. So the UK is going into a very weird situation, but it's producing conflict between England, conflict and Scotland, conflict between England and Wales, conflict between the Tory party and the other parties in this state. And this conflict is a very fertile environment for explaining what the situation is with me being detained in the United Kingdom without charge for 4.5 years and in this embassy for almost 3 years, both at a European level and at an international level.
Okay, Mr. Assange, we just have 2 more minutes to go, and unfortunately I will only take one question. You know, friends of Frontline Club and our readers put questions on our website and Facebook pages. There's one interesting. It's signed by Michael Bird, and the question is like this: what is your advice for a whistleblower who is in possession of incriminating documents against the government? Who should they approach to leak them, and how should they proceed to ensure their anonymity is protected?
go to wikileaks.org and press the submit button. That's the obvious answer.
That's because the donate button doesn't work anymore.
The what?
Because the donate button doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't work?
It works, yeah.
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so. But you press the submit button. Now, there are certain questions that, let's say it's someone from Romania. Now, of course, WikiLeaks, most of our interface is not in Romanian, so that's a real barrier. But they can say what journalists they want to work with in Romania, and if it's good stuff, we'll work out what journalists we want to work with. WikiLeaks, as you like, it's not just the publication. We're sort of like a super agent for sources. We bring in the publications around the world or in particular countries that we think are going to get the biggest impact for the source. So yeah, Romanian journalists can direct people to come to WikiLeaks and say, please refer this to whatever their name is. The source can say, I was referred by so-and-so. I don't give too much detail about when you were referred, because if there's interception at the source end, then that could be used to, say something about them. This, electronic submission technology is quite interesting. So WikiLeaks has a very interesting trick that it applies to make sure sources are anonymous, which is every single page, and we have millions of pages and hundreds of thousands of readers every day. Every single page has embedded within it the instructions and the special cryptographic information that people use when they click that button. And when sources click that button, no information, new information goes to them. So even if the connection has been spied upon, no one can tell that the source has clicked that button, because every single reader, every time they read anything on WikiLeaks, gets all that information about how to submit things and in what method to do it. And then embedded within those instructions are methods about how to cryptographically set up a connection so it can't even be seen that you're communicating with WikiLeaks at all. So this is a pretty clever trick that we rolled out about a month ago when we introduced our next generation submission system. And no one else is doing this, so we're quite proud of that.
Thank you very much again for being with us today. Have a nice day and thank you again. Doamnelor, domnilor, mă întorc către dumneavoastră. Vă mulțumesc că ați participat la dezbaterea de astăzi și pentru că participați de obicei atunci când colegii de la Frontline vă cheamă la astfel de dezbateri. O să puteți accesa înregistrarea în integrală pe gandul.info și o să vedeți și pe Frontline niște linkuri către ea, dacă vreți să o mai revedeți odată. De asemenea, iarăși e o promisiune pe care o facem, o să încercăm să mai organizăm astfel de dezbateri și pe viitor. Poate puțin mai animate. Ideea este să vă implicăm pe voi, în primul rând, în legătură. Vă mulțumesc încă o dată. Thank you, Mr. Assange, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.